He turned back, his eyes meeting hers, tired, guarded, but not quite guilty. But there's something. Okay, Sophie and we've gotten close. Too close, maybe. It's not physical, Elena. I swear it's emotional. She gets me, listens when I'm drowning in work. You've been so wrapped up in your clients, your head, I didn't know how to talk to you. The words hit like a slap, not because they were cruel, but because they weren't entirely wrong. She had been distant nights spent analyzing others' lives, not theirs. But that didn't justify this. Emotional, she repeated, her voice rising. You're telling me you've been pouring your heart out to her instead of me. That's supposed to make it better. No, he said quickly. It's not better, it's a mess. I fucked up, I know that. But it's not an affair. It's not what you think. Then what is it? She demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it's you sneaking around, lying about hotels, texting her behind my back. You're gaslighting me, Mark, making me feel crazy for seeing what's right in front of me. I'm not. He stopped, pinching the bridge of his nose. Look, I'll cut it off. No more late nights, no more texts. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I love you, Elena. I don't want her. I don't know. I got lost. She stared at him, his words a tangle she couldn't unravel. Love. Lost? It sounded sincere, but sincerity was his specialty, charm wrapped in just enough vulnerability to disarm. She wanted to believe him, to cling to the life they built, but the cracks were too wide now. I don't know if I can trust you, she said, quieter. Not after this. Elena, please. He reached for her, but she stepped back, the space between them a chasm. Let me fix it. Tell me what you need. I need time, she said, turning away. And I need you to leave. Stay somewhere else tonight, your sister's, a hotel, I don't care. Just go. He didn't argue, which surprised her. Maybe he saw the steel in her eyes, the line she'd drawn. He nodded, grabbing his bag and jacket, pausing at the door. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure this out. When he was gone, the flat felt too big, too empty. She sank onto the couch, the email still clutched in her hand. Emotional, not physical. Was that better? Worse? Her therapist brain parsed it. Emotional affairs could cut deeper, betrayals of the mind more than the body. But her heart didn't care about definitions, it just hurt. She called Claire, her voice breaking as she recounted it. He's admitting something, but not everything, she said. I don't know what to believe. Claire's response was immediate. He's giving you half the story. Classic Mark. Emotional affair. Bullshit. That hotel room wasn't for a heart-to-heart. Dig deeper, Elena. He's still hiding. Claire was right. The hotel, the texts, the way he'd flinched at the email, it didn't add up to just friends. She opened her laptop again, pulling up his email trash. More digging revealed nothing new, but then she checked his browser history, cleared, except for one stray link from a week ago, a florist's site. She clicked it, a receipt for roses, delivered to an address in Hackney. Not their flat. Not his office. Her breath caught. Roses. For Sophie. She Googled the address, a residential building, no name attached. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was another lie, another thread to pull. She'd follow it, confront Sophie herself if she had to. Mark could spin his story, but he couldn't rewrite the facts. That night, she lay awake, the rain a steady drum against the windows. She'd asked for the truth, and he'd given her a piece enough to placate, not enough to heal. Tomorrow, she'd chase the rest, no matter where it led. The trust was gone, replaced by a cold, relentless need to know. The flat was a mausoleum after Mark left, its silence oppressive, broken only by the relentless drip of rain against the glass. Elena sat on the couch, the folded email crumpled in her lap, her fingers tracing its edges until the paper softened under her touch. She'd won, in a way forced a confession, driven him out, but victory tasted like ash. Emotional affair. The phrase looped in her mind, a cruel refrain. Not physical, he'd said, but the distinction felt meaningless when her chest ached like this, a hollowed-out space where trust used to live. She poured another glass of wine, the bottle nearly empty now, its contents a blurry lifeline. The first sip burned, the second numbed, but neither quieted the storm in her head. She'd spent years building walls, professional detachment, analytical calm, yet here she was, crumbling like one of her clients, raw and unguarded. She hated it, this vulnerability, this loss of control. She hated him for dragging her here. Most of all, she hated herself for not seeing it sooner. Her eyes drifted to the bookshelf, a photo of them in Paris catching the dim light, her laughing, Mark's arm around her, the Eiffel Tower a hazy backdrop. 2 years ago, a lifetime ago. She'd felt safe then, certain of him, of them. Now, that certainty was a ghost, and she was alone with its absence. The wineglass trembled in her hand, and she set it down before it spilled, her breath hitching as the tears came hot, unbidden, a flood she couldn't stop. She curled into the couch, knees to her chest, and let it take her. The sobs were ugly, ragged, tearing through the quiet like something wounded. She hadn't cried like this in years, not since her mother's kitchen, 16 and clutching those letters, her father's secrets spilling out in cursive loops. The memory clawed its way up, sharp and uninvited, pulling her under. It was a Tuesday, the air thick with summer heat, the kind that stuck to your skin. Elena had been home alone, her mother at work, her father supposedly on a business trip. She'd gone to his study for a pen, rifling through his desk careless, bored when she found them. A stack of envelopes, tucked beneath a ledger, their edges worn from handling. The scent hit her first jasmine, faint but foreign, not her mother's rosewater. She'd hesitated, her teenage curiosity warring with a vague, instinctive dread, but she'd opened one anyway. "My darling James," it began, the handwriting elegant, deliberate. "Last night was everything. I can still feel your hands, the way you looked at me. She doesn't see you like I do, doesn't know what you need. I'll wait for you, always." No signature, just a lipstick smudge, a crimson kiss pressed into the corner. Elena had read it twice, her stomach dropping, before tearing through the rest. 5 letters, each a dagger, each detailing stolen moments her father had carved out of their family. She'd sat there, the study spinning, until her mother came home. Elena hadn't hidden it, couldn't. She'd thrust the letters at her, voice shaking. "What is this? Who is she?" Her mother's face had crumpled, not with shock but recognition, a weary grief that said she'd known, or suspected, for longer than Elena could fathom. "It's complicated," she'd said, her voice small. "Your father, he's not perfect." The divorce came later, a slow unraveling arguments behind closed doors, her father's half-hearted apologies, her mother's quiet resignation. Elena had watched it all, a spectator to her own fracturing, vowing she'd never let it happen to her. She'd chosen Mark because he seemed different, steady, not a wanderer. She'd built her life on that belief, and now it was sand slipping through her fingers. The flashback faded, leaving her breathless on the couch, the present crashing back. Mark wasn't her father, but the echoes were deafening, secrets in shadows, words that didn't match actions. She wiped her face, the tears sticky on her cheeks, and stood, unsteady. The wine bottle mocked her from the table, empty now, a hollow shell like her. She tossed it in the bin, the clatter loud in the stillness, and stumbled to the bathroom. The mirror showed a wreck, red eyes, tangled hair, a woman she didn't recognize. "Get it together," she muttered, splashing cold water on her face. But the water didn't wash away the ache, the gnawing sense that she'd failed not just Mark, but herself. She'd missed the signs, ignored the silences, let her marriage drift into this abyss. Was it her fault? His? Both? Her phone buzzed on the counter. Claire, checking in. "You okay? Call me if you need me." Elena typed a quick "fine, just processing. Talk tomorrow," and set it down. She wasn't fine, not even close, but she couldn't face Claire's fierce certainty yet. She needed to sit with this, to feel the weight before deciding what came next. She wandered to the bedroom, the bed unmade, Mark's pillow still dented from his head. She sank onto it, pulling the covers over her, his scent woodsy, faint clinging to the fabric. It should have comforted her, but it didn't. It was a reminder of what she'd lost, or maybe never had. She closed her eyes, exhaustion tugging at her, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, her mind spun Mark's voice, "It's not physical," clashing with Sophie's texts, the hotel email, the roses in Hackney. She sat up, heart racing. The roses. She'd almost forgotten. That address, it was a lead, a lifeline out of this mire. She grabbed her laptop, opening the florist's receipt again. 17 Milton Road, Hackney. She mapped it 20 minutes by tube. She could go now, see for herself, but it was past midnight, the rain a steady roar outside. Tomorrow, then, she'd find Sophie, or whoever lived there, and demand answers Mark wouldn't give. The decision steadied her, a thin thread of purpose in the chaos. But as she lay back, the thread frayed. What if it was Sophie? What if she opened the door, roses in a vase behind her, smug or oblivious? What if Mark was there, his lies laid bare? Elena's chest tightened, a sob catching in her throat. She couldn't picture it without breaking, couldn't imagine facing them without shattering completely. She rolled onto her side, clutching Mark's pillow, the tears starting again, not loud this time, but quiet, seeping into the fabric. She'd spent her life fixing others, analyzing their fractures, but she couldn't fix this. She was 16 again, powerless, watching her world collapse. Only now, there was no one to blame but herself or Mark or the cruel ambiguity of love. Morning crept in, gray and sluggish, the rain unrelenting. Elena rose, her body heavy, her mind a fog of grief and resolve. She showered, dressed, brewed coffee, mechanical acts to keep her moving. The address burned in her thoughts, A17A Milton Road. She'd go today, after her clients, and face whatever waited. But first, she had to survive the hours ahead, the pretense of normalcy. Her phone rang as she sipped her coffee. Mark. She stared at it, the screen a taunt, then let it go to voicemail. His voice came through a minute later, hesitant. Elena, it's me. I'm at Sarah's. I'm sorry, really. Call me when you're ready. I love you. The words twisted the knife deeper. Love. She didn't know what it meant anymore. She deleted the message, her hands shaking. Love wasn't enough, not now, not after this. She'd find the truth, even if it destroyed her. The emotional descent had stripped her bare, but it hadn't killed her resolve. Not yet. The rain hadn't stopped, a gray curtain blurring the world beyond the flat's windows. Elena sat at the kitchen table, the coffee gone cold in her mug, her laptop open to the florist's receipt. She couldn't stop staring at 17A Milton Road, Hackney. She'd planned to go today, to chase the truth down that unfamiliar street, but her body wouldn't move. Her resolve, so sharp last night, had dulled under the weight of exhaustion and a creeping numbness she couldn't shake. She needed help, someone to untangle the mess inside her before she lost herself completely. She called her therapist, Dr. Naomi Carter, a woman whose calm precision had steadied Elena through years of professional burnout and quiet personal crises. The phone rang twice before Naomi's voice came through, warm but measured. Elena, it's good to hear from you. What's going on? I need to see you, Elena said, her voice cracking. Today, if you can. It's bad. Naomi didn't hesitate. I've got a cancellation at 11. Can you make it? Yes, Elena said, glancing at the clock, at 9:45. Thank you. The tube ride to Naomi's office in Bloomsbury was a blur, the clatter of the train a distant hum against the roar in her head. She arrived soaked, her umbrella forgotten, and climbed the narrow stairs to the familiar room, soft beige walls, a low bookshelf, a single armchair facing a couch. Naomi was there, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes sharp behind wire frames. You look like you've been through it, she said, gesturing to the couch. Sit. Tell me. Elena sank into the cushions, her wet coat dripping onto the floor. She didn't know where to start. The texts, the hotel, Mark's confession, so she let it spill out in jagged pieces, her voice trembling but steadying as she spoke. He says it's emotional, not physical, but there's more. I know there is. Roses, a hotel room, lies he can't explain. I don't trust him, Naomi. I don't trust myself anymore. Naomi listened, her pen resting on her notepad, her silence an invitation rather than a judgment. When Elena finished, breathless, Naomi leaned forward slightly. Let's start with you. What's this doing to you, Elena? Not Mark, not the evidence, what's happening inside? Elena exhaled, her hands twisting in her lap. I'm falling apart. I can't stop crying, can't sleep. I feel betrayed, obviously, but it's more than that. I feel stupid. Like I should have seen it, should have stopped it. I'm a therapist, I fix this stuff for other people, and I couldn't fix my own marriage. Naomi nodded, her expression soft but unflinching. You're blaming yourself. Why? Because I let it drift, Elena said, the words tumbling out. I got busy, clients, sessions, my own head. I stopped asking him about his day, stopped noticing when he pulled away. If I'd been there, really there, maybe he wouldn't have turned to her. Maybe, Naomi echoed, her tone neutral. Or maybe he would have anyway. You're assuming you had control over his choices. Did you? Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. Did she? She'd always thought of their marriage as a partnership, a shared construction, her stability, his charm. But control? I don't know, she admitted. I thought I knew him. Now I don't. That's a loss, Naomi said. Not just of trust in him, but in your own perception. You're grieving that certainty. What does it remind you of? The question hit like a stone through glass, shattering the fragile wall she'd built around her past. My dad, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When he cheated, I found the letters, jasmine perfume, Promises to some woman I never met. My mom knew, or suspected, but she stayed quiet until I forced it out. I swore I'd never be her blind, passive. But here I am. Naomi's pen moved now, a quiet scratch against the paper. You're not your mother, Elena. You're confronting this, even if it's messy. But let's go back 16, finding those letters. What did that do to you? Elena closed her eyes, the memory flooding back the humid study, the lipstick smudge, her mother's defeated slump. It broke me, she said. I felt betrayed, but also responsible. Like if I'd been better, smarter, prettier, something maybe you wouldn't have looked elsewhere. I carried that for years. Still do, I guess. And now? Naomi prompted. With Mark. It's the same, Elena said, her voice cracking. If I'd been enough wife, enough partner, he wouldn't have needed Sophie. I know it's irrational, but it's there, screaming at me. I failed him, failed us. Naomi set her pen down, leaning forward. You're projecting that 16-year-old's guilt onto this. Your father's choices weren't your fault, Mark's aren't either. You're not failing because someone else crossed a line. But you're punishing yourself anyway. Why? Elena's throat tightened, tears prickling her eyes. Because it's easier, she said, the realization dawning as she spoke. If it's my fault, I can fix it, be better, try harder. If it's his, I'm powerless. I hate that. I hate not knowing if I can save this, or if it's already gone. Naomi nodded, letting the words settle. Powerlessness is terrifying, especially for you. You've built your life on understanding, controlling outcomes for others. But marriages aren't therapy sessions. You can't analyze your way out of this hurt. What do you feel, beyond the guilt? Elena wiped her eyes, her breath shaky. Angry. At him, for lying. At myself, for believing him. Sad, God, so sad. Like I've lost something I can't get back. And scared. Scared he's still lying. Scared I'll never trust anyone again. That's a lot to hold, Naomi said. You're mourning not just the marriage you thought you had, but the version of yourself you trusted to see it clearly. What do you need right now, Elena? Not from Mark, from you. She stared at the rug, its faded pattern blurring through her tears. I need to stop running, she said. From this, from myself. I keep digging texts, emails, addresses thinking it'll fix me, but it's just noise. I need to feel this, not fight it. Naomi smiled faintly, a rare warmth breaking her reserve. That's a start. You're good at dissecting others. Turn that inward, gently. Sit with the anger, the sadness. Let it breathe. You don't have to decide everything today. Elena nodded, the weight shifting slightly, not lifting, but redistributing. What if I can't? She asked, her voice small. What if I'm too broken? You're not broken, Naomi said firmly. You're hurting. There's a difference. You've survived this before, your parents, your own doubts. You'll survive this too, whatever shape it takes. The session ended too soon, the clock ticking past noon. Elena left with a soaked coat and a fragile clarity, Naomi's words echoing, sit with it. She walked back to the tube, the rain a cold companion, her mind a churn of past and present. She saw her 16-year-old self furious, betrayed, standing beside the woman she'd become, both wounded by love's failures. She'd spent her life running from that girl, building a career, a marriage, to prove she'd outgrown her. But she hadn't. She'd just buried her. At home, she skipped the coffee, the laptop, the chase for answers. Instead, she curled up on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders, and let herself really feel. The sadness was a tide, pulling her under, the anger a fire, flickering but fierce. She cried again, softer now, not for Mark but for herself, the girl who'd trusted, the woman who'd tried. She didn't know if she'd forgive him, leave him, or find a middle ground. She didn't know if the roses in Hackney would break her further. For once, she didn't need to know. She just needed to be broken, yes, but still here. The rain had eased by afternoon, leaving a damp sheen on Camden streets as Elena stepped out of the flat. Her session with Naomi lingered, a quiet ache, a permission to feel, but it hadn't dulled the pull of 17A Milton Road, Hackney. The address was a splinter under her skin, and sitting with her pain didn't mean ignoring the truth. She needed to see, to know, even if it shattered her further. She grabbed her coat, keys, and a resolve that felt more like desperation than strength. The tube ride was a jostle of bodies and noise, the district line rattling eastward. She stood near the doors, clutching the pole, her reflection flickering in the window, pale, determined, a woman on the edge. Hackney Central loomed after 20 minutes, and she emerged into a neighborhood of red brick terraces and hipster cafes, the air sharp with wet pavement and faint curry spices. She pulled up the map on her phone, the blue dot pulsing toward Milton Road, a 10-minute walk, each step a countdown. Her mind churned as she moved. What would she find? Sophie, smug behind a door with roses on the table? Mark, caught mid-lie? Or nothing, a stranger, a mistake, another dead end? She rehearsed her approach calm, direct. I'm Elena, Mark's wife. Who are you to him? But her pulse betrayed her, a frantic rhythm she couldn't slow. Naomi's voice whispered, sit with it, but this wasn't sitting, this was chasing, a compulsion she couldn't shake. Milton Road was narrow, lined with Victorian houses split into flats, their paint peeling in places. Number 17 was halfway down a 3-story building, its front door chipped green, a buzzer panel listing A, B, and C. She pressed 17A, the buzz loud in the stillness, and waited, her breath shallow. No answer. She pressed again, harder, as if insistence could summon someone. Still nothing. Her stomach sank empty-handed. Again. She stepped back, scanning the windows. The ground floor, as 17A, she assumed had curtains drawn tight, no hint of life. A neighbor's door creaked open, an older man with a gray beard peering out. You looking for someone? He asked, his voice gruff. Yeah, Elena said, turning. The tenant in 17A. Do you know them? He shrugged, scratching his chin. Young woman, dark hair. Keeps to herself. Seen her with a bloke a few times, tall, dark hair too. Not lately, though. She's in and out. Elena's heart stuttered. Sophie. Mark. It fit too well. Thanks, she said, her voice tight, and he nodded, retreating inside. She stared at the buzzer again, the description circling like a vulture. A young woman, a man matching Mark's build. She could wait, camp out on the steps, but that felt too desperate, too unhinged. Instead, she took a photo of the building, a marker for later, and walked away, her thoughts a tangle. The cafe across the street beckoned, a small place with steamed-up windows and the hum of conversation. She ordered a tea, settling at a table by the glass, her eyes fixed on 17A. She'd wait an hour, she decided, sipping the too-hot liquid. If Sophie or whoever showed, she'd confront her. If not, she'd rethink. The tea scalded her tongue, grounding her in the moment, but her mind drifted back to Mark's voice. It's not physical. The roses said otherwise. 40 minutes passed, the cafe emptying around her, when a figure appeared, tall, dark-haired, a woman in a navy coat juggling keys and a grocery bag. Elena's breath caught. It was her, the woman from Mark's office, the one leaning close over blueprints. Sophie. She crossed the street, her movements quick, and disappeared into 17A. No Mark, no roses visible, just her, alone. Elena's hands shook as she paid for the tea, her resolve hardening. This was it. She crossed to the building, buzzing 17A again, her heart a hammer against her ribs. A pause, then a crackle. Hello. The voice was light, slightly accented Scottish, maybe. She stepped back, scanning the windows. The ground floor, as 17A, she assumed had curtains drawn tight, no hint of life. A neighbor's door creaked open, an older man with a gray beard peering out. You looking for someone? He asked, his voice gruff. Yeah, Elena said, turning. The tenant in 17A. Do you know them? He shrugged, scratching his chin. Young woman, dark hair. Keeps to herself. Seen her with a bloke a few times, tall, dark hair too. Not lately, though. She's in and out. Elena's heart stuttered. Sophie. Mark. It fit too well. Thanks, she said, her voice tight, and he nodded, retreating inside. She stared at the buzzer again, the description circling like a vulture. A young woman, a man matching Mark's build. She could wait, camp out on the steps, but that felt too desperate, too unhinged. Instead, she took a photo of the building, a marker for later, and walked away, her thoughts a tangle. The cafe across the street beckoned, a small place with steamed-up windows and the hum of conversation. She ordered a tea, settling at a table by the glass, her eyes fixed on 17A. She'd wait an hour, she decided, sipping the too-hot liquid. If Sophie or whoever showed, she'd confront her. If not, she'd rethink. The tea scalded her tongue, grounding her in the moment, but her mind drifted back to Mark's voice. It's not physical. The roses said otherwise. 40 minutes passed, the cafe emptying around her, when a figure appeared, tall, dark-haired, a woman in a navy coat juggling keys and a grocery bag. Elena's breath caught. It was her, the woman from Mark's office, the one leaning close over blueprints. Sophie. She crossed the street, her movements quick, and disappeared into 17A. No Mark, no roses visible, just her, alone. Elena's hands shook as she paid for the tea, her resolve hardening. This was it. She crossed to the building, buzzing 17A again, her heart a hammer against her ribs. A pause, then a crackle. Hello. The voice was light, slightly accented Scottish, maybe. Sophie. Elena said, her tone firm. I'm Elena Holloway, Mark's wife. I need to talk to you. Silence stretched, thick and heavy, before the buzzer clicked, the door unlatching. Elena climbed the stairs, each step a plunge deeper into the unknown. The flat's door was ajar, Sophie standing there taller than Elena remembered, her dark hair pulled back, her expression wary but not surprised. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The flat was small, tidy wood floors, a sofa, a kitchenette. No roses, but a vase sat empty on the counter, a silent accusation. Elena stayed near the door, her coat dripping onto the mat. I'll keep this simple, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor inside. What's going on with you and Mark? Sophie's eyes flickered, nervous, but not guilty. She set her grocery bag down, crossing her arms. He told you, then? About us. He told me it's emotional, Elena said, the word bitter on her tongue. Not physical. But I found a hotel receipt, texts, roses delivered here. So I'm asking you, what's the truth? Sophie's brow furrowed, then smoothed, a faint laugh escaping her. Roses. Yeah, he sent those weeks ago, after a project win. A thank you. Nothing more. The hotel, that was a group thing, Elena. I was there, but so were 5 others. Check the booking if you don't believe me. We're not sleeping together. Elena stared, her mind racing. A group thing. Roses as a gesture. It matched Mark's story too neatly, maybe. Then why the texts? She pressed. Missed you today. You're terrible at hiding it. That's not work talk. Sophie sighed, leaning against the counter. Look, I won't lie, we're close. Too close, probably. He talks to me about work, about you, about feeling stuck. I listen. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. It's not an affair, not the way you think. He loves you, Elena. He's a mess over this. The words landed like stones, heavy but not crushing. Loves her. A mess. Elena wanted to believe it, to cling to the lifeline, but doubt gnawed at her. He's lying to me, she said. If it's just talk, why hide it? Why the late nights, the secrets? Sophie shrugged, her gaze steady. Ask him. I'm not his keeper. I've told him to sort it out with you. He's scared, I think. Scared of losing you. But I'm not the enemy here. Elena's throat tightened, anger and relief warring inside her. Not the enemy, but not innocent either. You crossed a line, she said. Both of you did. If it's not physical, it's still something that's breaking me. Sophie. Elena said, her tone firm. I'm Elena Holloway, Mark's wife. I need to talk to you. Silence stretched, thick and heavy, before the buzzer clicked, the door unlatching. Elena climbed the stairs, each step a plunge deeper into the unknown. The flat's door was ajar, Sophie standing there taller than Elena remembered, her dark hair pulled back, her expression wary but not surprised. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The flat was small, tidy wood floors, a sofa, a kitchenette. No roses, but a vase sat empty on the counter, a silent accusation. Elena stayed near the door, her coat dripping onto the mat. I'll keep this simple, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor inside. What's going on with you and Mark? Sophie's eyes flickered, nervous, but not guilty. She set her grocery bag down, crossing her arms. He told you, then? About us. He told me it's emotional, Elena said, the word bitter on her tongue. Not physical. But I found a hotel receipt, texts, roses delivered here. So I'm asking you, what's the truth? Sophie's brow furrowed, then smoothed, a faint laugh escaping her. Roses. Yeah, he sent those weeks ago, after a project win. A thank you, nothing more. The hotel, that was a group thing, Elena. I was there, but so were 5 others. Check the booking if you don't believe me. We're not sleeping together. Elena stared, her mind racing. A group thing. Roses as a gesture. It matched Mark's story too neatly, maybe. Then why the texts? She pressed. Missed you today. You're terrible at hiding it. That's not work talk. Sophie sighed, leaning against the counter. Look, I won't lie, we're close. Too close, probably. He talks to me about work, about you, about feeling stuck. I listen. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. It's not an affair, not the way you think. He loves you, Elena. He's a mess over this. The words landed like stones, heavy but not crushing. Loves her. A mess. Elena wanted to believe it, to cling to the lifeline, but doubt not at her. He's lying to me, she said. If it's just talk, why hide it? Why the late nights, the secrets? Sophie shrugged, her gaze steady. Ask him. I'm not his keeper. I've told him to sort it out with you. He's scared, I think. Scared of losing you. But I'm not the enemy here. Elena's throat tightened, anger and relief warring inside her. Not the enemy, but not innocent either. You crossed a line, she said. Both of you did. If it's not physical, it's still something that's breaking me. Sophie nodded, her expression softening. I'm sorry for that. Really. I'll back off. Should have done it sooner. But you need to talk to him, not me. Elena turned, her hand on the doorknob, the flat's warmth stifling now. I will, she said, stepping out. The stairwell was cold, the air a slap as she descended. Sophie's words echoed. He loves you. Not an affair, but they didn't heal her. They didn't erase the hotel, the roses, the months of distance. She'd come for answers and found half-truths, a puzzle still missing pieces.
The tube ride back from Hackney was a descent. Each stop stripping away the fragile hope Elena had clung to. Sophie's words, he loves you, not an affair, rattled in her skull, a hollow promise she couldn't trust. The flat greeted her with a stale silence, the air thick with the ghosts of their life together. She didn't wait, didn't sit with it as Naomi had urged. She texted Mark, come home. Now, no explanation, no softness, just a command, cold as the rain streaking the windows. He arrived an hour later, his key turning in the lock like a gunshot in the quiet. She stood in the living room, arms crossed, the email and florist receipt on the coffee table like evidence in a trial. He stepped in, jacket damp, his face a mix of weariness and wariness. You okay? He asked, tentative, as if testing the air. No, she said, her voice a blade. I went to Hackney, saw Sophie. She told me her side emotional, not physical, just like you said. But it's not enough. Mark, I want the truth of it. Every lie, every moment you chose her over me. Now. His eyes widened, then narrowed, a flicker of panic crossing his features. You went to her flat. Jesus, Elena, what the hell? Don't, she cut in, stepping closer. Don't turn this on me. You sent her roses. You booked a hotel room. You texted her things you never said to me. Sophie says it's not an affair, but it's something, and it's killing me. So tell me everything or we're done. He exhaled, sharp and ragged, running a hand through his hair. Okay, fine. You want it all. Here it is. He paced, his voice rising with each word. Sophie and you got close. Yeah, too close. It started months ago, late nights, drinks after work. She listened when I was drumming work. The pressure. You being distant. It wasn't planned. Elena, it just happened. Just happened. She spat, her fists clenching. You don't stumble into secrets like that. The hotel, what was it? He stopped, his jaw tight. That night, we were drunk. The team left, and it was just us. We went to the rumors, not mine. We kissed. That's it. I stopped it. I swear. I couldn't, he faltered, his eyes dropping. I couldn't do that to you. The confession landed like a punch, stealing her breath. A kiss, not sex, but a betrayal. All this on his lips on hers. His hands, his want. She saw it, vivid and cruel. Sophie's dark hair, Mark's hesitation melting into desire. You stopped, she said, her voice trembling with rage. How noble. And the roses, the texts. I missed you today. What was that? Stupidity, he said, desperate now. 14, I guess. I liked how she made me feel seen, alive. You were so wrapped up in your world. I felt invisible. I fucked up. Elena, I know I did, but I didn't sleep with her. I love you. Love, she laughed. A jagged, broken sound. You don't lie to someone you love. You don't hide them from your mess. You kiss her. Mark, you wanted her, and you let me think I was crazy for doubting you. She grabbed the email, shoving it at him. This room 312 was that love. Or this? She threw the florist receipt, the paper fluttering to the floor. Roses for her, silence for me. He flinched, stepping back. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I'll end it completely. No contact. Nothing. We can't fix this. Elena, please. Fix it. Her voice rose, cracking the room open. You broke us. You broke me. I've been tearing myself apart, nights crying, days chasing your lease because I loved you enough to believe you, and you gave her what was mean, your time, your heart, your fucking kiss. She advanced, tears streaming now, her finger jabbing his chest. You don't get to fix that. You don't get to decide I'm okay with it. Elena, he reached for her, but she slapped his hand away, the sting echoing in her palm. Don't touch me, she hissed. You don't get to touch me after her. Get out. Take your shit and go. We're done. His face crumbled, shot giving way to desperation. Don't do this. 12 years can't throw that away over one mistake. One mistake, she screamed. The dam breaking. It's not one night, say 100. Every late night, every text, every time you chose her over me. You threw us away, Mark, not me. I'm just burying the corpse. She grabbed his jacket from the chair, hurling it at him. Go. He caught it, his eyes wet, his voice a plea. I love you. I'll fight for this. Then you should have fought before you kissed her, she said. Cold now, the fire burning now into ash. Leave, now. He stood there, frowning, then nodded. Defeated, he grabbed his bag, the receipt still scattered on the floor, and walked out, the door slamming shut like a gunshot. The silence that followed was deafening, a void swallowing her whole. She sank to the floor, her back against the couch, sobs tearing through her knit soft, not quiet, but brutal, a howl of grief and fury. 12 years, gone, the man she trusted, the life she built, reduced to a hotel kiss and a bouquet of lies. She saw her father's letters again, her mother's brokenness, her own 16-year-old rage, and now this, a mirror she couldn't escape. She vowed to be different, stronger, but here she was, gutted by love's betrayal. The flap blurred through her tears, its warmth a mockery. She crawled to the bookshelf, yanking the Paris photo down, the frame cracking as it hit the floor. She smashed Etan's twisted glass splintering, their smiling faces fracturing into shards. She didn't stop, grabbing his books, his sketches, tearing them apart, a storm of destruction fueled by a pain too big to contain. When it was over, she sat amid the wreckage, glass, paper, her shattered trust, her hands bleeding from a cut she didn't feel. The rain pounded outside, a cruel applause. She'd lost everything, Mark. Their marriage, the woman she'd been, but in the ruin, there was a strange, savage clarity. She wasn't her mother, wooden in silence. She wasn't 16, powerless. She'd faced it, fought it, and ended it. She stood, wiping her face with a blood-streaked hand, and walked to the window. The street below was empty, washed clean by the storm. She didn't know what came next: forgiveness, loneliness, a new start, but she knew one thing: she never let anyone break her like this again. The tears dried, her breath steadied, and in the wreckage of her old life, Elena found something hard, unyielding, the survivor's heart, forged in the fire of her own devastation.